Welcome to Saturday Night Scares, scary stories for adults and brave teens. I'm Sarah, the Digital Services Librarian, and tonight I'll be reading from The Ghost Club, Newly Found Tales of Victorian Terror, collected by William Meikle and published in 2017. The tale that I'm reading is from a very familiar author, Bram Stoker. It's titled In the House of the Dead. From the Journal of Brian Mulrooney, September 29, 1889. I stood for George Calhoun at his wedding 2 years ago, and I stood beside him again today at the funeral of his dear Elizabeth. She has been taken by the consumption, aged just 23, with a baby on the way, having just this past summer moved into a new, now empty, house in leafy Beckenham. In her passing, she has left behind a bereft husband, who I fear will never be the same man again. The shock has shriveled and diminished him to the merest shadow of his former self. My poor friend George started weeping on my arrival on his doorstep this morning, and he was still sobbing bitterly as I held him upright by the graveside several hours later. It was a perfect autumn day in South London, the tree colors softened by the season to a melancholy that matched our moods as the lady and the child she was carrying were lowered into the ground. The priest did a lovely job in sending her off, and many of those present, myself included, I am not ashamed to admit, shed a tear. But George heard none of it, and I had to remind him when it came to throwing earth on the coffin. I do believe he heard nothing of what was said to him, not a word of sympathy or an offer of help, until we retired to the back room of the Fisherman's Arms, and I handed him a large glass of whiskey. He looked up at me, his eyes red from weeping. "How am I going to cope now, Brian?" he asked. And I was just smart enough to keep my mouth shut, for even I know better than to answer a question like that on a day like this. We drank like we were returned to our old bachelor days in Dublin, although there was none of the dancing and singing that would have been the norm back then. Instead, George spoke, and I listened. It was why I was there, after all. It is why I've always been there for George, even as far back in memory as our early school days, back when his mouth always ran faster than his brain, a trait that persisted in all the years ahead. Through everything that we had done in our past before we had a care in the world or jobs to tie us in place, George talks and I listen. That is the way of things. I did a lot of listening today, and at the start he was not saying anything I did not expect from him. He talked of Elizabeth, a dead wife, a dead child, and dead hope, ashes in his mouth. I could not do anything for him but give him more drink and hope it would eventually at least give him the release of sleep. People, acquaintances, mourners, and some of George's workmates came and departed again, and the day drew on. The drink seemed to have no noticeable effect on George, no matter how many I plied him with. He had twice as much as I had and was still coherent and still smoking like a chimney when the crowd finally thinned and we were left alone, just the two of us, all alone with too many dead memories. George got weepy again for a time, and I thought the liquor was finally starting to take its hold. But he surprised me by taking an envelope from his pocket and handing it across the table to me. "I received this yesterday morning. A terrible thing to send to a man in mourning, I thought, and almost burned it right off. But something made me put it in my pocket, and it has been weighing on my mind. I need your advice, Brian. As my oldest friend, I shall trust your judgment on the matter." I opened the envelope to find a letter written in a fine, feminine hand, addressed from a house in Whitechapel. Dear Mr. Calhoun, please forgive my intrusion into your grief, but there is really no good time for you to hear what I have to tell you. And indeed it might be best to hear it now, while your memory of her is yet fresh. You can see her again. I know you are a good Christian man and that you believe that in any case, but you do not have to wait for your own demise. There is a house. There are many houses where those who suffer can come and seek solace, where they can peer into a life where their loved ones go on and can be seen and heard. As I said, I know this is an intrusion, but I feel it is my duty to write, for, you see, your Elizabeth is here even now at my very shoulder, and it is she who has asked me to pen this note. Please take this letter in the spirit it is intended, and believe me when I say it is written in all sincerity. She is here, waiting for you, should you wish to see her. Yours faithfully, Ms. Susanna Greenling. I started to crunch the vile thing up, intending to toss it aside, but George took it from me, smoothed it out, folded it up, and put it away again. Do not even consider it, man, I said vehemently. It is an attempt to fleece you of what little coin you have. These vile spiritualist scum prey on the recently bereaved. You can bet that every death notice in the papers all across the city has received a similar missive. You asked for my counsel? Follow your first instinct on the matter. Burn it. Burn it now. That is my counsel. George nodded sadly. I know you are right, Brian, and you are a good friend. But it hurts. It hurts like blazes. That was the last bit of sense I got out of him, for the liquor did indeed finally take hold, and I helped him away up the road to his bed. He is up there now, sleeping like a babe and snoring. He almost sounds contented. I wish with all my heart that he did not have his grief to wake him up to in the morning. But I shall stay to ensure that the morning does indeed come, and in time poor George might find, if not contentment, then at least acceptance and a modicum of peace. From a letter sent 1st October 1889, George Calhoun to Brian Mulrooney. I know you advised strongly against it, Brian. I was not that far drunk to forget that. But after you left yesterday and I was on my own again in the house, it was as if that envelope kept calling to me. I sat in the kitchen all morning drinking tea, tears tripping me, just reading it again and again. And the house just felt too empty, so bloody empty. Everywhere I looked, I expected to see her, to hear her. So I went out for a wee walk. I promise you that is all I intended, at first at least. But I found myself at the railway station when I happened to look up, and 5 minutes later I was on a train heading into town, making for the center, to be among people, to feel alive, although I was not sure I would ever feel fully alive again. I got off the train at London Bridge and had a pint in the George, letting the old building remind me that people came and went in this town, but pubs endured. Then, after a couple there, I wandered up to Borough Market, had a pie and a few more beers, a lot more beers, in the market porter. Watching the city work around me did much to ground me back to reality. But as I crossed London Bridge, heading north, it all came back to me again, the coughing and the crying and finding her poor wee body spent and dead on the floor. I almost ran into the first bar I spotted, and I started drinking on rum, doubles straight up, 3 of them before I stopped shaking. Things got a bit hazy after that for a while. As dusk came, I was sitting in a bar I didn't remember entering, one I didn't recognize, and from the decor and clientele, I knew I wasn't anywhere near the town center. It was a working man's pub, Dockers at a guess, Battered wooden tables and chairs, leather seats around the walls which were split and patched. I had a large glass of rum and a half of a beer on the table, with no memory of ordering either. And I was no longer alone. An elderly woman had joined me across the table. "You look like you need some company, dearie," she said. If she'd been younger, I might have taken her for a prostitute, but she reminded me of my old Auntie Maggie, and I was too tired to argue in any case. I merely nodded and almost jumped out of my seat when the lady took my hand. "Don't worry, dearie," she said. "Surely it can't be that bad." That's all she had to say to get me started. Despite a usual reticence and no wish at all to speak about it, I found it all tumbling out. The old lady never let go of my hand. "You don't know it yet, son," she said, when I finished wrung out and spent. "But you've come to the right place." "There is no right place, not anymore," I said. I finished off the rum, but before I could turn to order another, the old lady put a fresh glass in my hand. "What if I told you that you could see her again?" she said softly. That's when I remembered the letter in my pocket and your words, Brian. "I'm not buying. Not tonight, not ever." "Elizabeth said you'd say that," she said quietly. "And you came, didn't you? You got the letter. Will you come to the house? It's just round the corner. We'll have a chat and a wee drink. I'll make you some supper. A big lad like you needs to eat when he's drinking. And I'll tell you why you came here and what you need to know." Somehow, fate, providence, or my own dreams leading me by the nose, I know not how, but I had come to find the writer of that very letter you read in The Fisherman's. And, oh, help me, I think I wanted to be here. Mrs. Greenling, for it was indeed the letter writer herself, was as good as her word. She led me to a tall townhouse just around the corner from the bar. "I'm the concierge," she said rather grandly, as if it was a title rather than a job description. She was in number 1, just inside the hallway door. She showed me to an armchair, and I sat gingerly near the front edge, afraid to relax into it lest it swallow me whole. The old lady was still on the other side of the room, but I felt something touch the back of my hand, a soft stroking. Elizabeth, had always done that when she felt I needed calming. "You'll have questions?" Mrs. Greenling said. "I will have questions," I agreed, "many of them. Here is an easy one to start with. What in blazes is going on here?" She smiled, and for the first time I saw the deep sadness in her. Something in her eyes that told me she too had suffered, still suffered. "It is an outlandish story, I'm afraid," she replied. "There are houses like this all over the world. Most people only know of them from whispered stories over campfires, tall tales told to scare the unwary. But some of us, those who suffer, some of us know better. We are drawn to the places, the loci, if you like, where what ails us can be eased. Yes, dead is dead, as it was and always will be. But there are other worlds than these, other possibilities. And if we have the will, the fortitude, we can peer into another life, where the dead are not gone, where we can see that they thrive and go on. And as we watch, we can sometimes gain enough peace for ourselves that we too can thrive and go on with them. You will want to know more than why, you will want to know how. I cannot tell you that, none of us has ever known, only that the place is important and the sigil and token are needed." "Sigil?" Token? I asked. The sigil is the marking of the flesh. By knife or tattoo, it matters not. The token is something of the dead that you remember them by. Return when you have both, and you will see her again. You will see each other again. And at that precise moment, Elizabeth stroked the back of my hand and whispered my name in my ear. She's there, Brian. My Elizabeth is there. And I mean to go to her tomorrow. Your good friend as always, George. From the Journal of Brian Mulrooney, October 2nd, 1889. I got George's letter first thing this morning, and it disturbed me so greatly that I decided not to go into work, but to make my way post-haste to the house in Beckenham. I was fully intent on stopping my friend before he made a fool of himself and handed his money to a charlatan. I arrived on his doorstep, ready to remonstrate loudly with him, but I got no answer to my knocking, and when I checked round the back, it was to find the house locked tight, no sign of anyone inside. I walked back to High Street, unsure where to look for him, when who should I see but the man himself? He looked deathly tired, but he had a broad grin on his face as he spotted me, and an even broader one as he guided me into the nearest public bar, which was just opening for the day. I did not even get a chance to get a word in edgewise, for off he went, 12 to the dozen, telling me everything all over again that he had already covered in his letter. Was her, I'm telling you straight, Brian, and I just don't know. I know the touch of my own wife's hand, if I know nothing else. I know her voice and the timbre of her whisper. It was her, and I shall see her tonight. Please, for me, I said, take some time to think on it before going and doing something rash. He smiled again. It is a tad late for that, boyo, he replied, and rolled up his sleeve to show me the inside of his left forearm. There is a new tattoo there, still red and livid, but clear enough. A white rose and a name inscribed below it, Elizabeth. I am going tonight, he said after hiding the tattoo again. I have her necklace, I have the tattoo, and I have the fact that I found my way there without even thinking about it. I was called. She called me. I am going, Brian. I cannot do otherwise and remain sane. Your sanity is what concerns me, I replied, and not for the first time. But my poor attempt at humor fell flat, and his grin faded to be replaced by the infinite sadness I had seen at the funeral. I need this, Brian. I cannot live and not know. Will you come with me? I knew the question was coming, and I dreaded it, but I would not indulge him in this fantasy. It was one thing I was not prepared to listen to, and I told him so in no uncertain terms. We parted badly, each angry with the other, and I sore regretted it as soon as my train pulled out of Beckenham Junction station. I can only hope he comes to his senses sooner rather than later, and sees the error of pandering to this madness. But I worry about my friend, and yes, I worry for his sanity. From a letter sent 3rd October 1889, George Calhoun to Brian Mulrooney. I am right sorry to have parted so angrily yesterday, Brian, and I can only hope you do not think badly of me for it, but I have seen her. I have seen my Elizabeth, and she has seen me. I know you cautioned me against this very course of action, but I can only tell you that if I had not gone back to Whitechapel, I would have been as miserable as sin for however much time is left to me. As it is now, I feel hope stir in me again, hope that all is not merely shadows and dust. But I am getting ahead of myself. I intend to explain this to you in person over a drink, but it will help me to set it all out in writing here. It will help me to make sense of it to you without the booze getting in the way, so to speak. My feet found their way back to the Whitechapel house with no trouble at all, and the concierge seemed to know exactly when I would approach and had the door open and ready on my arrival. She showed me upstairs to a room on the first landing. If I didn't know better, I would swear that whoever had decorated it had seen inside my head, so fitting was the furnishing accommodation, down to the large bed, heavy armoire, and even the bottle of Bushmills Best on the bedside table. "What happens now?" I asked of Mrs. Grinling. She smiled sadly again. "Now you do what you do best, sir. You talk. And if she hears you, she will come, and all will be well." So I talked. As you well know, Brian, it is indeed the single thing I do better than all others. I talked, I drank the Bushmills, and I played with the necklace I had taken there with me. I talked as if she was lying in the bed beside me, and I told her of my grief and of my joy that she had brought me, of the fears for the future and of the shadows and dust in my head. And now comes the hard part, the part where I have to convince you of the weight of reality in that room. I cannot express how I felt when she stroked the back of my hand, when she whispered in my ear, when I looked in the armoire mirror and saw her standing there, smiling sadly as she spoke my name. The tears blind me as I write this, but they are tears of joy at the memory. I was so filled with raw emotion that I stumbled toward the mirror, thinking that I might embrace my love there and then. But even as I approached her, her reflection wavered and dimmed, as if a fine mist had come between us. I blinked, and when I looked again, she was gone. But I remember just fine how she looks. She is radiant and merry, Brian, and I believe in my heart still a child. I remember her whisper and the touch of her hand. Mrs. Greenling says that it is a good start. I have been invited to stay in the townhouse to see how things progress, and I am of a mind to take her up on the offer. We shall speak more of it when I next see you, but for now I am as happy as I have been for a week. Elizabeth is still with me, and I am with her, and all is well. From the Journal of Brian Mulrooney, October 4th, 1889. George's second letter had me more than ever determined to put a stop to his nonsense. However, I could not in all faith take myself away from my work for another day for fear of losing the job completely, so I only made my way south of the river late in the evening, taking the train from Charing Cross and arriving in Beckenham after 6. I was worried that I might have missed him completely, that he might have headed up to Whitechapel again, but I found him at home, although he was intent on packing a suitcase for himself even as I arrived. He smiled and took my hand most warmly, but he looked more ill than ever. His cheeks were sunken, and his eyes merely dark pools hidden in shadow. He seemed thinner somehow, as if his clothes had suddenly become too large for his frame, and he looked ashen in the gaslight that flickered and sputtered in the house. I pleaded with him, calling in any favor he might feel he owed me for our friendship, berating him for his foolishness, and finally threatened to knock him on his hind end if it would prevent him from leaving. But all he did was smile sadly at me, and I knew then that my cause was lost. He was set in his purpose. All I could do was keep a close eye on him and hope that his disappointment when he found that he was being misled was not going to crush him completely. I did manage to get him to promise that he would not overextend himself financially, and I ensured that he took nothing of any great value with him in the suitcase or on his person. I even had him leave his father's silver pocket watch in my care, for I knew it was of some value, both monetary and emotional, to him, and I could not bear to see him lose it. It is the best I can do for the moment. I accompanied him north as far as Charing Cross again, and at least this time we parted amicably enough, although my heart almost broke at the sight of my frail friend dragging that heavy suitcase along the Strand in search of a carriage to Whitechapel. From a letter sent 7th October, 1889, George Calhoun to Brian Mulrooney. I've seen her again. Despite your protestations, Brian, I really do believe that I have made the correct choice in staying here these past nights. Each sleep brings her closer, and the concierge says that now the room and I are attuned, she will be here as long as I am present. And she talks to me now, Brian, things that only a man and wife can know about each other. There is no subterfuge here that I can see, and no possibility of any trickery. It is my Elizabeth, as sure as eggs are eggs. The concierge is keeping me fed steak and potatoes, if you can believe it, and good strong ale, so you should not fear for my well-being, although I am mighty tired. I put that down to the hours I am keeping, for she is stronger by far at night, and I find I can will myself to stay awake as long as she is with me. But that is not the full sum of my news, Brian. Elizabeth tells me that wherever it is she is now, and she knows no more than I do on that matter, wherever she is, the child is most definitely still with her, and it is kicking, getting ready to be born. I shall be a father, Brian. After all of this, after all the sorrow, I can still be a father. From the Journal of Brian Mulrooney, October 8th, 1889. I made my way to Whitechapel immediately on receiving George's final letter, but I was too late, far too late. Maybe if the concierge had not seen fit to bar my entry at my first attempt, maybe I might have saved my friend. But I fear I was always going to be late. I fear it was too late as soon as he received that blasted letter, even before the funeral. I had to find a policeman to help me gain entry to the townhouse. I had the devil of a job persuading him that I feared for the life of my friend. He thought I was just another drunk Irishman, that being his usual lot when confronted with an account such as mine. But I finally persuaded him both of my sobriety and of the seriousness of my intent, and it was he who finally convinced the concierge to allow us access. I made my way immediately to the first floor landing, and did not even have to ask which room George had taken, for the door lay open, and I saw that he lay on top of the bedclothes. An empty bottle of Bushmills lay on the carpet below, an outstretched hand that looked far too limp, too pale. The shirt sleeve was rolled up, and I saw the too white, rose tattoo. I stepped forward, fearing the worst. George smiled up at me from dead, cold eyes. There was no life left to him. I do believe I sobbed them, my own grief welling up, and I was answered from somewhere in the room. A child cried out and was shushed immediately by a soft, whispered voice I almost recognized. I turned. The mirror in the armoire seemed misty and clouded, although that may well have been the tears in my eyes. Two shadows, close together, seemed to move in the mist beyond the glass, and I heard soft cooing sounds, the kind you use to soothe a babe. "George," I whispered. "Will you wet the lad's head with me, Brian?" A voice I knew only too well said in my ear. The next thing I remember is standing back out in the hallway, attempting to find my breath and trying not to look back at George's dead body. Having seen that there was a dead man in the room, the policeman was suddenly all business, taking charge and seeing to the particulars. He took a statement from me that I hardly remember a word of at all. Then I made believe. The concierge stopped me on the stairs. "You can see him again," she said softly. I pushed her roughly aside, went out the front door, and headed round the corner. There was a bar there. George had told me that, among many other things. And while I sit here writing this and getting the first of what I intend to be many drinks inside me, I have taken out his pocket watch and started to think. So help me, I have started to think of getting a tattoo. The end. Or is it? Do you think he'll go on to get that tattoo? Will he go back to see his friends? Who knows? That is the end of this tale, and it's the end of our time tonight. We hope that you've enjoyed Saturday Night Scares, and we'll be back next week at 8:30 with another horror story. Join us again, if you dare.